Hello, friends of Studio Brûlé. This is Steve Brûlé, and it's coffee time. Today we've got a big topic on hand. It's actually, in my mind, we've been talking about this since the beginning, the same kinds of topic, the tyranny around the world, the use of fake emergencies and keeping people in fear to grasp at emergency powers. Well, these emergency powers are quickly turning into permanent powers right around the world. And Michael Keller in the comments I just read just before starting going live here pointed out that the CDC chief was fired for pointing out that we wouldn't know there was a pandemic if not for the PCR test. And that's very true. As you know, the PCR test detects if you've ever been exposed to the virus, whether you are infective or whether you are infective or not, or whether you had any symptoms or not. We never tested for flus before. And my gut feeling is that if we tested for flus and other viruses, we'd find all kinds of them too. And they too could be spun up into massive fear in the population, in the citizenry, in order to grasp at emergency powers forever. So this seems to be the strategy of the elite and the tyrants of the world today, is to keep people terrified of ordinary everyday things that we've always had before us in order to maintain and increase their tyrannical emergency powers. But I've got a lot of try to go very quickly at it. So I'm going to jump right in here to open up a quote that from Stockwell Day, who was a previous political leader in Canada from maybe 15, 20 years ago. And Stockwell says, post-vax stroke. Another friend has had a stroke after a second jab. We're told it's rare, it's a coincidence, it has zero to do with the vax. I just don't know why post-vax problems everywhere aren't being reported with the same intensity as pre-vax deaths over the last year. This is a very important point, although he doesn't elaborate sufficiently on it. The fact is that COVID-19 was recorded for every possible way. If somebody died on a motorcycle and had COVID, they call it COVID deaths. They did this if you had a heart attack and died of a heart attack, but you had COVID, they called it a COVID death. They did this all to support their claim that we're in an emergency and to pump up the numbers and keep people terrified. They're doing the exact opposite with the vaccines, the completely 180-degree opposite. Many people have reported, and doctors have reported, that they call in to report adverse effects and they get put on hold and never answered. They don't want to hear them. They don't want to record them. You can have a legitimate heart attack due to a thrombosis that's known to be caused by some of these vaccines, and they will record it not related to the vaccine. So the stats on COVID-19 have been inflated. The stats on the adverse effects to the vaccines are being repressed. They're being repressed. All of it points in the same direction. Keep the people afraid, maintain your emergency powers, and assume tyrannical control over the whole world. Let's move on. Here, Australia plans to shelve AstraZeneca COVID vaccine by October because of the adverse effects of AstraZeneca. Now, not very long ago, just a matter of weeks ago, they were touting the safety and effectiveness of AstraZeneca and all the other ones. But lo and behold, they are going in Australia, and I applaud them for this, they're going to put that on hold. But that's not going near far enough. None of these vaccinations have been approved by the CDC or Canada's health agency or any of the health agencies of the world. All of them are there on the strength of the claim, the false claim, that we're facing an emergency, an existential threat of huge proportions. Here, Trudeau says he's hopeful, but no guarantee, as Delta variant hangs over Canada-US border decision. The Delta variant, you've probably heard of it, and stay tuned for very shortly. We're going to show you just what this Delta variant is and why it too is an overly Did I lose? Can I hear? Are you guys with me? My camera seems to be flicking off and on. Let me know if you're still with me in the comments here. Let's have a look at what Trudeau says. This no guarantee thing with the COVID variant, and I'm going to put this right out there, right up front here and early on, is that we are always going to have this virus and other viruses with us forever. If we succumb to this claim of emergency powers and extreme orders in order to so-called control the virus, we will always be under lockdown. They will always have it hanging over our head. We need to completely reject this and get back to life as normal. Now, probably for saying that, YouTube's going to delete this video too, like it did with my previous one. And I was put into YouTube jail for a week over that, and I'm just getting back to it now. I'm going to repost that video on another website. Let me know what you think are the best YouTube alternatives now. Rumble, I've heard. I have a library, and there's another one, I forget the name of it. But in any case, that video is going to be posted. And I'm also thinking of a new strategy of just leaving YouTube with teaser videos and putting all my videos, future videos, onto another platform to watch. Let me know what you think about that in the comments as well. YouTube is full on into shutting down freedom of speech when it conflicts with the orders and the goals of the elite. So, Michael says Odyssey. Yes, I've heard about that. I think that's pretty good. I am on Telegram, by the way, under my name, Steve Brule. Look for me there. Now let's read this one here. Justin Trudeau says he hopes in the coming weeks to announce a loosened travel restrictions to the Canada-US border, though that will depend on the trajectory of COVID-19. The Prime Minister offered a broad timetable Tuesday as he faces heat for reviewing an arrangement that will keep pandemic measures in place at the frontier until at least July 21st. Canada don't allow in Americans, but Europeans do. Canada is certainly the most extreme response to these so-called pandemics in the Western world. Let's read on. Trudeau's caution comes amid growing domestic and global concern about COVID-19's Delta variant, and at a time when Canada's own rate fully vaccinated individuals only just moved above 20%. Yeah, the Delta variant is just another excuse to extend emergency powers. Tyrannical powers. Political, this is from Political. Read on from the top with me if you will. But so far, the lighter rules will only apply to fully vaccinated citizens, residents, and other individuals who already have a right to enter to Canada, leaving non-essential travelers, including Americans, on the outside. Now, look at this, to fully vaccinated citizens. In other words, saying they don't want a vaccine passport, but lo and behold, if you don't have a vaccine, you don't have the rights to travel in and out of Canada freely. That's exactly the same as having a vaccine passport. That's what a vaccine passport is used for, to restrict your movement. Now they're going to say, Trudeau said in January, we won't have a vaccine passport, but they're going to restrict your movements if you don't have the vaccine. That's a vaccine passport. Despite many questions, reading on, the Trudeau government has shared no dates and very few concrete metrics for when it will start opening Canada's door to foreign travelers. Ottawa did say this week that any update will require full vaccination of at least 75% of the Canada's population. That is not going to happen in the next 3 weeks. If we're talking 20% right now, 75% is an extra 55% of the population. 55% of Canadian population is about 18 million people. Do you think this country can vaccinate 18 million people in a matter of a few weeks? Not a chance. Let's read on for the top. Trudeau said Tuesday that more than 75% of eligible Canadians had one shot of a COVID vaccine and more than 21% were fully vaccinated. The fact that so many people are getting vaccinated in Canada is very, very good news. Not to me. But anyways, to each his own. If you want to stick an experimental drug into your body, and I'm going to talk about just some new research into messenger RNA and just how dangerous and unknown and not understood messenger RNA is in the body. This is very important, and it is an explosive. I think I'll be the first person to report on this explosive new research with relating to the functions of messenger RNA in true biological science. Let's read on for now. That's coming up shortly. The fact that so many people are getting vaccinated, okay, we think we already read that. And here it says, I understand the impatience people have to get traveling again, but keeping Canadians safe has been and will continue to be our #1 priority. It's not traveling again. It's getting the tyrants out of power that I'm getting impatient about. Traveling again is just an automatic result of being a free person. It's not the point of getting all removing these things. The point of removing these restrictions is to reinstate our freedoms, and that includes the freedom to travel. If we have to get vaccinated and fall under other tyrannical rules just to travel, then we still don't have freedom. Let's read on. From the top, U.S. frustrations. As vaccination rates rise in both companies, Trudeau and Biden are under pressure to start removing public health measures to put in place at the border in March 2020. The loudest calls for reopening come from lawmakers, business leaders, property owners, and so on. Central arguments of those who want border measures lifted is that fully vaccinated travelers should be free to cross. I don't think you should have any restrictions. Canada is being too tight on this. Not about vaccinations. I'm going to skip ahead on this. He's talking about, well, I'll read the second paragraph, and of course you can always go back and freeze if you want to read more detail about some of these posts. The government said beyond vaccination coverage, any decisions of reopening the border will also have to consider case counts, hospitalization rates, local outbreaks, variants, and the situation elsewhere in the world. In other words, we will do what we willy-nilly want to, no matter what, in order to serve our goal of staying in totalitarian power in Canada. So I'm going to skip this too. Here at the bottom, this fellow professor of epidemiology at some school, University of Toronto, says it's very appropriate to be cautious because the variants have moved the goalposts. Again, the variants here. The variants are going to be with us forever. These people know that. So that means that they will always be able to use an excuse of some new virus to say, lock you in your home, shut down the borders, destroy your businesses, put your loved ones at risk, cancel scheduled surgeries, all that in the name of your safety, and restrict your freedoms. Here, I saw this the other day. This is kind of got my ire up. Safety is sexy. I have to say, and I tweeted this, some of you may have seen it, I am sick of the words safe and safety. Safety is the opposite of sexy, and it is the opposite of freedom. All of its derivations point in the same direction: lame, frightened sheep seeking enslavement. Safe should be a 4-letter word for all of us who love freedom. Freedom has never been safe. Never. You should be free to be unsafe. To yourself, certainly. Not to others, obviously. That's not freedom. That's restricting other people's freedoms. But I digress. Let's carry on. No plans for divisive vaccine passports for Canadians, Trudeau says, in January 14th of this year. And yet, he intends to restrict your travels if you don't get the vaccine. That's what a vaccine passport means. And here, Canada marginalizes non-believers. I retweeted Rebel News here. Justin Trudeau's government declared today that starting in 2 weeks, fully vaccinated travelers to Canada will no longer be forced to self-isolate for 14 days and will no longer be shoved into COVID hotels. That's still not freedom. No longer a conspiracy theory. Vaccine passports are coming to Canada. This is another tweet I copied here. I think it's in that same time frame. If you think it will stop and only apply to an international travel, good luck with that dream, and I concur. This is the biggest and best tool for totalitarian power ever to emerge in the Western world, and these tyrants are not about to give it up. They will never give it up willingly. The only thing that can take it away from him is the will of the people to rise up and say, enough is enough, we're not going to be ruled by tyrants anymore. This from Wholesome King, June 18th. This is the best news I've heard all day, and this is what gives us pause of concern for those who love freedom. There's a huge contingent, I would even say a majority in Canada, who want their freedoms taken away, who are happy to believe that the government is looking after their safety. Of course, that's a fantasy. This guy concurs. Oh, this is great news. And here, we've been using basically the same system for years for our kids, that little yellow immunization card. How is this any different? It's different because it's mandatory and it restricts your freedoms of adults who should be free to move in the world. Here, show me your papers, please, is here. That's exactly what it is. And here, passports are good, from Mike the Hound. No travel is bad. Everybody man up and get a card or whatever. We've been at home for a year. What does one card take in your wallet? Nothing. Do not be a Trumper. This is how simple-minded, I would say stupid in the extreme, that a majority of Canadians are. That injecting a messenger RNA vaccine into your body, accepting the totalitarian orders of a tyrant, is just okay. You just have to go along, and so supposedly it's going to be okay after you go along with this current step. There'll never be an end to the steps. But this is the mentality. Man up. Go get your card. Go get vaccinated. Obey the tyrant. You are an embarrassment to humanity, Mick the Hound. No wonder this coward doesn't use his name or his picture in his Twitter. And I got another thing for that. People who don't put their face out there and their name out there and are out totally anonymous for fear of this, they're actually not doing any good. They're fearful. And here's a fearful tweet from a fearful man who should not be followed. Kurt Bennett says, if you think proof of vaccination hasn't been necessary for travel too much for the world for decades, you don't know much about international travel. It's not a conspiracy, it's common sense. No, in the past, there has been no vaccination requirements for travel except for countries in which there was a serious chance of getting a life-threatening disease. And even then, in my mind, in my memory, it was voluntary. But there may have been some areas of the world, maybe some Ebola outbreak in which they would not let you in there. That didn't mean they didn't let you in other countries of the world. This is going global for a virus which is not that dangerous. Let's read on. Can't wait to get my second shot, and if proof of vaccination is required, to travel. I'll be ready to travel. NFL games this year, Mexico at Christmas. Can't wait. To those that don't get vaccinated, I guess I won't see you there. This is a simple-minded, stupid, childish, immature response to the situation we're facing today. These people, these kinds of people, are a danger to freedom all around the world. They're a danger to freedom because these are the ones who will force the governments and support the government for forcing vaccines, for allowing the tyranny to continue. Let's carry on. They've been talking about this since early 2020 when the pandemic was in the early stage. Why is that? It's always been a plandemic. Exactly. They've been preparing vaccine passports and health cards for 10 or 20 years. Another so-called conspiracy, haha. That's true. It's not a conspiracy anymore, and it's never been a conspiracy. And here, Adobe put out Adobe Scan, PDF scanner with OCR PDF creator. And what do they say in their tweet? Scan it, save it, and access it from anywhere with Adobe Scan. At the bottom, read the fine print here. Let me expand it up for you. Keep your vaccine card safe. Over 22 million people use this. The big companies all around the world are lining up themselves in preparation for these vaccine restrictions and vaccine passports. Here, I don't know if you guys saw the video, the dance video, the most pathetic thing I've ever seen, talking about, oh, I've got my vaccine, I can open up now, I can hug my friends and I can hug my family and so forth like this. And they did like a Broadway show style cabaret song and dance. And it was so pathetic, so incredibly pathetic. This is the celebration of wimpiness, the celebration of simpiness, the celebration of sheep. Pathetic doesn't even capture it. If you Google it if you want to see it, it's incredible. some geeky, goofy people bouncing around in the street singing, "It's time to make new memories once you've got the vaccine." It's a pathetically bad song besides. Now, here in Sydney, Australia, this is another one that caught my eye. 22 cases, not new deaths, just 22 new cases. Sydney, that represents 0.001% of Sydney. They deliberately shut down and locked down the entire city of Sydney. Roughly 350,000 people. Represents 0.001% of Sydney for 22 cases. And for that, the deliberate fear-mongering has caused people to surrender their ability to think rationally. And for that, we must live under tyranny. These are 22 cases, not deaths, not hospitalizations, just 22 new cases, probably found by PCR testing of people who didn't even have any symptoms, didn't know they had it. But for that, they shut the entire city down. This is classic insanity, but it's insanity with a purpose. It's being driven by the elite at the top, and we're falling for it. Here, the WHO said children should not be vaccinated for COVID-19 right now. This was around June 19th. June 22nd, they said this. This is the date right here. It was on their website, and I read it at the time. And here, the World Health Organization is recommending that parents hold off vaccinating children for COVID-19 according to its June guidance. The WHO states that since they tend to experience mild diseases compared to adults and blah, blah, blah. You know the thing here. Just don't vaccinate children, they said. Then, 2 days later, the WHO quietly edits COVID-19 vaccine page, removes the section advising against vaccinating children. Read on. It appears the World Health Organization changed their website today. You can see the difference in the two screenshots. And there's the screenshots. You can look at them later if you like with the changed edited parts. I'm just going to skip through this quickly. You can go back and find these pages if you like, but I got a lot of material to cover here. Now, and this following this, Not the Bee reported, Make-A-Wish America now, requiring kids to be vaccinated before having a wish granted. I think this Make-A-Wish is for program is a program for children with either life-threatening or lethal cancer, and they're requiring them to get vaccinated in order to participate in the program. This is how insanely stupid these tyrants are. This is crime against humanity. All of this, what's going on right now, are crimes against humanity. And in the face of this, let's look what happened in Israel. Israel faces a COVID surge as virus circulates even among the vaccinated. The Delta variant blamed after clusters identified around schools and health ministries calling for inoculation of children as young as 12 years old, June 22nd. Infections peaked in January with over 10,000 daily cases, falling to new cases, daily cases in single digits this month, in June. The country reported 125 new cases in 24 hours on Tuesday, the highest one-day total since the end of April. Again, it's cases in the entire country of Israel. Now, I don't know the population of Israel off the top of my head, but I'm going to imagine it's in the millions. So, 125 cases, again, is frighteningly small. And yet they are going to have more lockdowns and stuff. The latest outbreaks were identified in several schools following random testing and came after Israel removed nearly all of its coronavirus restrictions following a dramatic decrease in cases and world-leading vaccination campaign that began in December. So notice here that they only found these 125 cases by testing. In other words, there are people who didn't even know they had the virus. They may not even be infective. And if they use the PCR test, they may have been not even in a current stage of infection. So they may not be infectious. But they're shutting down and causing this emergency for 125 cases. Imagine if in the past we had been testing for flu viruses. We would have likely found a frightening degree of flu viruses. many of them not active in people or not even particularly dangerous. And yet there would be, the caseloads would be in the millions in every country, because the flu is so ubiquitous and we've lived with it forever. But now 125 new cases of people who didn't even know they had it, and they're going back into emergencies. This is insanity. This is hysterical insanity. In the response to the outbreak, the Health Ministry called for a widening of the vaccination campaign to include children 12 to 15 and ordered students to wear masks in schools today. This is insanity by testing. Something you would have never known was there. And if we started testing, if we had the capacity to test for every virus that's on our bodies every day, there are billions of viruses on our body, and probably thousands of different kinds of viruses. We live with them nonstop. But if you did test, you would scare everybody into pouring bleach on their skin. Let's read on. Over 55% of Israel's 9.3 million citizens have received 2 doses of the vaccine, and it's over 90% who've received 1 dose. So this is going to tell you right now, this is the future, folks. They're going to always find a new variant. They're always going to find new cases, and the smallest number of cases is going to be used to justify tyrannical powers. Let's read on. Nearly a third of the new cases in the past week have been vaccinated individuals. Isn't that interesting? The vaccine is nowhere near as useful as the authorities are trying to convince us of. 33% of the new cases are in vaccinated people. And many of the new infections are with the Delta variant. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Delta variant in a minute. Hezi Levi, the Health Ministry Director General, told Israel's Channel 12 News on Monday that most of the new cases among vaccinated persons are mild, but called on parents to vaccinate their teenage children. Teenage children are not at risk. The vaccine has unknown potential risks. And yet they're going to do that to every kid, even kids who are not likely ever to face the virus and have no risk from it if they do. This is the insanity of our world. This is from Trudeau. It's up to all of us to follow public health guidelines to beat COVID-19. That's why I'm in quarantine after G7, NATO, and Canada-EU summits. That's why I took my day 8 test today. That's why I'll keep working from home until my 14-day quarantine comes to end. That comes from our little liar-in-chief, the Prime Minister of Canada. Here he is here, posing for the camera. Trudeau is an actor. He's a grade 4 drama teacher actor. He's not a successful actor. But that's his framework of viewing the world. That's why he played Mr. Dress-Up in India and traveled all over the world embarrassing Canada. That's why he puts on his funny little socks. That's why he does blackface. That's why he's done all these things. He's a pretender. And he's pretending to be a leader. And he's pretending to follow rules. He's pretending to have our interests at heart. He's pretending that there's an emergency. Our pretender tyrant. That's who he is. Let's read from the top. An expert review panel recently said the hotel quarantine policy had no scientific basis and recommended the government scrap it, noting that travelers arriving by land faced no such rule. The rules are arbitrary. They're meant to get you accustomed to blindly obeying rules in order, like that other previous tweeter said, I can go back to Mexico and I can go see football games. They're entirely missing the point. You're being totally controlled from every side. The opposition Conservatives have slammed the fact that the hotel Trudeau stayed at isn't one of the government-approved accommodations and reiterated its call for the program to be ended. Trudeau didn't even stay in his own COVID hotels. And the little tyrant has no idea what $2,000 means to regular Canadians for a 3-day stay in a hotel. Let's read on. Canada's rules for now call for not only quarantine hotel rigmarole but a 14-day total quarantine and another COVID-19 test. Hence Trudeau's public announcement that he's still quarantined and just took his 8-day test. Read on. This is what it's all about. The fear must continue in order for the elite to retain their absolute power. New Delta COVID variant arrives just in time to rationalize continued illegal, and it is illegal. The emergency powers are illegal, and I went over this in a previous episode. There needs to be a debate in Parliament for emergency powers, but they did not have that debate, and nobody held them accountable for it. The opposition folded. It's not a question of when it will end, but if, and it looks like no. And that's what I say is going on. They're not going to end any of this stuff until they have other measures of totalitarian control in place, and that the entire world is locked down by the tyrants. Under a one world government, no doubt. Now, we're going to just show you this video here. I think this is what is this here? Variant prevalence for all of England, available sequence cases from February 1st to January 1st here. Which is this one here? No, this is the okay, this is the variant, the Delta variant video. I'm going to show you, watch this video with me, because it explains just how non-issue this Delta variant really is.
And you'll see there's a link to download this short video below. Please share it so people understand it. So, Delta variant, is it different from...
Whoops, I don't know if we've got it here. Is it going? Seems like the video's not playing now.
Variant thing. And you'll see there's a link to download this short...
Okay, I'm going to start it over from the beginning.
And you'll see there's a link to download this short video below. Please share it so people understand it. So, Delta variant, is it different from the Indian variant? Everyone's confused. Well, actually, the Delta variant is the Indian variant. It was just rebadged. So, everyone needs to understand that. Now, this report just came out from Public Health England, and it explains everything. Here's the data on the variants. And we see the purple here is the Delta or Indian variant, and we see from early April it has absolutely dominated all the cases in the UK. So it was 10% already in mid-April. It was 50% of the cases in early May, and 75% by mid-May. And now it's pretty much nearly all of them, 90%. So if this is a problematic, dangerous variant, it would already have caused in the past month or two enormous impacts, right? Well, let's look. Here's government data, just taken. Goes right up to 17th of June. You can look it up. This is all government data. And you can see the hospitalisation impact. We'll add in a green trend line. We're going to use this in a moment. And we'll superimpose it over the variant graph. So back to our variant graph. Purple is the Delta or Indian variant, and it's obviously taken over the past couple of months in the UK. And we'll add in our hospitalisation real-world impact of SARS-CoV-2, and here's the line. And you'll notice that as this variant took over completely over a couple of months, effectively nothing happened, the real-world impact or hospitalisations. And this is clear as day. And be under no mistake, guys. This is not a projection. It's not modelling. It's not hypothesizing. It's not estimating. This is a de facto proof, an empirical proof that the variant doesn't add up to anything much at all in terms of real-world impact. So there you go. Now you know. So deadly variants or political scariants? Which is it? Well, it ain't deadly variants. We know that. We have proof of that now. So it's political scariants. And all this stuff you saw to take away your freedoms, well, that was political scariant mongering. And I mind you, we now have real-world proof that that is the case. Not projecting, not modelling, not hypothesizing. So there you go. You can tell all your friends, download the video below, and get it around there so people have a clue what's going on. Thank you.
So, folks, as you can see, this is scaremongering. All of it has been scaremongering since the beginning. But the fact that they're pumping up this variant, this Delta variant as a existential threat warranting lockdowns and more vaccines just pushes the proof right over the top. What we've been talking about since the beginning of this pandemic. Now, I'm going to move on to other things now. Just bear with me a second while I get myself up to date. This leads into the next phase. Zero Hedge reported, I think just a couple of days ago, that a surgeon was fired from the College of Medicine for voicing concerns about COVID shots for kids. And you're going to see why this is very important in a minute. Let's read on. Dr. Christian has been a surgeon for more than 20 years and began working in Saskatoon in 2007. He was appointed Director of the Surgical Humanities Program and Director of Quality and Patient Safety in 2018 and co-founded the Surgical Humanities Program. Dr. Christian is also editor of the Journal of the Surgical Humanities. In other words, this is a very highly qualified person who knows deeply what's going on, who should know. And he's voicing concern. So let's read on here. On June 17th, this is like a week and a half ago, Dr. Christian released a statement to over 200 doctors which contained his concerns regarding giving the COVID shots to children. In it, he noted that he is pro-vaccine. So he's not an anti-vaxxer. And in fact, we went over this in one of the previous sessions. Just because you don't want this vaccine doesn't mean you're an anti-vaxxer. And there's nothing wrong with being an anti-vaxxer either. I don't read that into what I'm saying. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I think there's a place for vaccines to do very good, important health benefits in the world. But not these vaccines. These are untested vaccines, and the pandemic is not the scary thing that the elite are making it out to be. So let's read on. And that he did not represent any group, the Saskatchewan Health Authority or the University of Saskatchewan. This is his personal released letter of concern, of conscience. He's a man of conscience, releasing a letter expressing his concerns of treating children with an unproven vaccine, an experimental vaccine. Let's read on. Dr. Christian noted that the principle of informed consent was sacrosanct and noted that a patient should always be fully aware of the risks of the medical intervention, the benefits of the intervention, and if any alternatives exist to the intervention. Very good points. Read on. Dr. Christian expressed concern that he had not come across a single vaccinated child or parent who has been adequately informed. That should be sending off alarm bells for everyone. Not everyone in the medical community, for sure. Everyone in society even. They're not being given informed consent about COVID vaccines. Not just for children, but for people too. Let's read on. Among his points, he stated, the messenger RNA vaccine is a new experimental vaccine never used before by humans before. Remember this. Messenger RNA, mRNA, RNA messages. That's the type of vaccines, one of the types of vaccines that's being pushed. It's the most dangerous one in my opinion because it is completely experimental. 2. The mRNA, messenger RNA vaccines, have not been fully authorized by Health Canada or the US CDC and are in fact under interim authorization in Canada and emergency use authorization in the US. He noted that full vaccine approval takes several years and multiple safety considerations. This has not happened. This is public knowledge. It's public knowledge that keeps being kind of minimized and pushed to the side in the rush to sell and administer vaccines. Let's read on. That in order to qualify for emergency use authorization, there must be an emergency. Well, he said there was a strong case for vaccinating the elderly, the vulnerable, and health workers. He said COVID does not pose a threat to our kids. I've been saying this since the first days of this pandemic. Protect the elderly, the vulnerable. Well, I didn't focus on the healthcare workers, but that's perfectly acceptable as well. The risk of them dying of COVID is less than 0.003%. That's the children he's speaking about. This is even less than the risk of them dying of the flu. There is no emergency in children. That same stat applies to people, healthy people under the age of 55 or so as well, which is why we should have been pushing for herd immunity naturally since the beginning. We would have achieved it last summer. Reading onward. Children do not readily transmit the COVID virus to adults. And yet they've been using that as an excuse to lock children out of schools. By the way, what happens when you lock everybody out of schools? Everybody does their education online. Who benefits? Big tech. Big tech. Their profits have gone through the roof, and they lobby for the continued shutdowns and remote work, remote learning. Reading on. Messenger RNA vaccines have been associated with several thousand deaths in the vaccine adverse reporting system in the US. These appear to be unusual compared to the total number of vaccines administered. He called it a strong signal that should not be ignored. Keep in mind that this thousands of deaths is even in spite of the fact of not accepting all the reporting, not reporting all the effects. And even regular people are not reporting it. I know several people in my circle who've had to be in bed after the first dose and had bad symptoms after the vaccines, and not one of them reported that to their doctors. And even when the doctors get the reports, they try to report it to the reporting systems, they often cannot. So this several thousand deaths, in my opinion, is a drastic underestimate of the actual adverse effects from these vaccines. Let's read on. This is where it gets really interesting and why we should have extreme concern on the messenger RNA vaccines. And I'm not quite getting to. I'm going to get to the tyranny of Trudeau very shortly because it's very, very disturbing as well. There's so many disturbing things going on in the world today, all at the same time, and they're connected, which is why I wanted to go through it. And this is evidence as to why we have strong reason to be very wary of this experimental messenger RNA vaccine. And I submit that the vaccine manufacturers know this already. But this came out June 12th, 2021, a mere 2 weeks ago. June 12th, 2021, published. New discovery shows human cells can write RNA sequences into DNA and challenges a central principle in biology. Let's let this sink in. Human cells can write RNA sequences into DNA. Messenger RNA. Let's read what it says in the report here. Reading from the top with me. Cells contain machinery that duplicates DNA into a new set that goes into a newly formed cell. That same class of machines, called polymerases, also build RNA messages, which are like notes copied from the central DNA repository of recipes, so they can be read more efficiently into proteins. But polymerases were thought to only work in one direction, DNA into DNA or RNA. This prevents RNA messages, that's messenger RNA. RNA messages, the way we're talking about it here in this particular report, is the messenger RNA, the same type of RNA material that are used in these vaccines, messenger RNA. Let's read this over. This one-way direction that they're talking about, which was thought to be one way, this prevents RNA messages from being rewritten back into the master recipe book of the genomic DNA. Now, Thomas Jefferson University researchers provide the first evidence that RNA segments can be written back into DNA, which potentially challenges the central dogma in biology and could have wide implications affecting many fields of biology. Now, let's just let this sink in. Oh, shoot. My green screen just crashed. Bear with me a sec. I'll be right back here. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. The breeze, I have to have the windows open here because it's so hot. I don't have, oh shit, that's going to blow over again. 1 second. Okay. Anyways. No, I don't need the green screen, but I do like it. I think it's a little more cool. Anyways, let's let this sink in. This is really, really important. This messenger RNA, these vaccines are messenger RNA. They have now demonstrated, proven with science, real science, not the lies that the elite are trying to shove down our throats about this vaccines and about this virus. These messenger RNAs, there's a mechanism for them to write DNA sequences right into rewrite your DNA. Insert code that they want in your DNA. Now, I'm not saying that that these vaccines right now have been designed to insert code, but they're untested, unproven, experimental. They could accidentally, or they could with unknown effect, rewrite your DNA, or at least edit it, insert code. And in the future, since they're going to have top-up vaccines, any kind of crazy source of scientists or elites or tyrants, if they want to insert something in your DNA, they could do it. They could delete, and you could go anywhere with this. Obviously, any kind of conspiracy could be imagined. They could put in a kill switch in you if they wanted to. A sequence of DNA that triggers apoptosis, which is death, cell death. It's like a cell suicide. They could do any of these things. And yet, this is not tested. This is experimental. What are they really experimenting? Are they really giving this vaccine to treat COVID-19, or are they really just refining their use of mRNA technology to recode and insert DNA into people's DNA? Well, I think it's a big experiment, and they're convinced the whole world to participate. Billions of people are taking these mRNA vaccines. At the same time as research is showing that mRNA can insert new code into your body's genes. Do not, I know this, look folks, YouTube's going to delete this video anyway, so I'm going to tell you right now, I would not stick an mRNA vaccine into my body under any circumstances. This is not known technology. This is not proven. There are so many ways in which this can go wrong. There are uncountable ways under which this can go wrong. If you really must take a vaccine, take one of the ones that are not an mRNA, traditionally made vaccines. I think the risks are less in that. This research is groundbreaking. And it's very odd that this research is reported at the same time, just after, in fact, they've started the program to inject the entire world with messenger RNA. Tell me this is not excessively coincidental, folks. Let's read on. The same article, the same research report. This work opens the door to many other studies that will help us understand the significance of having a mechanism for converting RNA messages into DNA in our own cells. Messenger RNA into DNA in our own cells. This is a vaccine? Is it really a vaccine? Or what is it? This is what conspiracy theorists have been saying. I never promoted this idea that maybe there was a conspiracy to recode our DNA in the past. But now I'm seeing research, legitimate biological research, being published that messenger RNA can do exactly that. And they are ramrodding this as hard as they can into billions of people around the world. This Richard fellow at the University, Jefferson University, quote, "The reality that a human polymerase can do this with high efficiency raises many questions. For example, this finding suggests that RNA messages can be used as templates for repairing or rewriting genomic DNA." There it is. Messenger RNA can be used to rewrite your DNA. And they're injecting an unproven one as an experiment into billions of people under the guise of a vaccine. You do think what you want about that. Whatever I would say is, I'd say just don't become a guinea pig in this experiment. This was published June 11th in the Journal of Science Advances. There's real science and real reason to be wary of all the messenger RNA vaccines. Now we're back to the original article from the doctor who was fired for raising concerns about consent to the vaccines and vaccinating children. His sixth point, he noted that vaccines have already caused serious medical conditions for kids, problems for kids worldwide, including a real and significantly increased risk of myocarditis, inflammation of the heart, Dr. Christian notes. The German National Vaccine Agency and the UK Vaccine Agency are not recommending the vaccine for healthy children and teenagers. They're not. But in Canada, they're giving it. And the World Health Organization pulled out its warning not to. Who's calling the shots here? It's not scientists. It's not real scientists. It's people like Bill Gates, not a real scientist, who's calling the shots to sell his vaccines and increase the wealth and power of the elite in the world. Let's read on. Dr. Christian's concern regarding underage COVID vaccinations are not isolated to him. The U.S. Center for Disease Control had an emergency meeting today to discuss the growing cases of myocarditis, heart inflammation, in younger males after receiving COVID-19 vaccines. Healthy males having heart problems after the vaccine. The CDC released new data today that the risk of myocarditis after the Pfizer vaccine is at least 10 times the expected rate in 12 to 17-year-old males and females. The German government has issued public guidance against vaccinating those under the age of 18. 10 times the rate, and that's even in spite of them not reporting all the adverse effects. The World Health Organization posted an update to its website on Monday, June 21st, which contained a statement in respect to advice for COVID-19 vaccination that children should not be vaccinated for the moment. Within 24 hours, the guidance was withdrawn and new guidance was posted which stated COVID vaccines are safe for those over the age of 18. So somebody with enormous influence and power at the World Health Organization saw that and told them to immediately take it down. Who might that be? Who has that kind of influence and motive to tell the World Health Organization to stop warning against vaccinating kids? Bill Gates does. The elite that run the world do. The ultra-billionaires who gave Tedros his job and promise him all kinds of wonderful futures if he toes the line. Let's move on. We are seeing a clear pattern of highly competent and skilled medical doctors in very esteemed positions being taken down and censored or even fired for practicing proper science and medicine, says Cameron. That's what's going on in the world today. The tyrants are in power. CTV News reported on this as well. The Saskatchewan surgeon continues COVID-19 claim but doesn't allow questions from the media. Notice that the CTV News emphasized that this doctor doesn't allow questions from the media. Well, boo-hoo. You media is bought by the Canadian Liberal government. He's right to be skeptical of talking to the media, but he released a press release anyways. The Saskatchewan Health Authority said in a statement to CTV News that it doesn't support any opinions that cast doubt on the seriousness of COVID-19 or the effectiveness of vaccine. Doesn't that summarize it right there? So much for follow the science. There's nothing scientific about rejecting any opinion that casts doubt on what you say. That's not science. That's tyranny. That's tyranny in place fully in Canada, across the country now. We cannot trust our leadership in any level of government in Canada. Any level of government. You have to read that a second time to actually believe that the health authority actually put out this statement. A health authority who you would presume would be interested in a scientific approach to the problem. But no, they don't support any opinions that cast doubt on the seriousness of COVID-19 or the effectiveness of the vaccines. Where are they getting their marching orders from? We're going to see a little more of that soon. This kind of communication feeds conspiracy theories and misinformation, as well as sends false messages that our healthcare workers at the front line are somehow faking or making up the loss of life and trauma. Conspiracy theory, is it? These aren't scientists. These are propagandists, and they're under the control of the tyrant in Parliament in Canada, Trudeau. Trudeau's under control of the elites. Thinks he's going to get himself a seat at the table of the big boys. Reading on, 4 COVID-19 vaccines have been approved for emergency use in Canada, including the Pfizer-BioNTech, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Moderna. Now, AstraZeneca is being discontinued in Australia for its risks. And Pfizer, we're going to see a little bit more about Pfizer in a moment. Now, notice here that the article says approved for emergency use in Canada in this first statement. But let's see how they always twist the narrative and change the narrative. Slightly further down the article. According to the Government of Canada website, only vaccines that are proven to be safe, effective, and of high quality are authorized for use in Canada. Proven. If it's proven, why isn't it approved by Health Canada? It's not approved by Health Canada. If it was true that these have been proven, then why are they not approved? They aren't approved because they haven't been proven. They have not gone through the testing procedures that vaccines are required to go through. Reading the second program, it added that all of the approved vaccines, notice now it's not approved for emergency use vaccines. Now the article just gets rid of the emergency use part of it to lead you to believe, emphasizing the approved. It's not approved. It added that all of the approved vaccines have been vigorously tested during the development and carefully reviewed by Health Canada. Carefully reviewed by Health Canada, huh? Yet not approved by Health Canada. This is not a small point. It is an enormous point. It is probably the most important point. These are not approved. Let's look at Pfizer. Pfizer, one of the so-called approved vaccines, who are telling us that their vaccines are effective and safe. Let's look at the history of Pfizer here. Pfizer has been a habitual offender, persistently engaging in illegal and corrupt marketing practices, bribing physicians, and suppressing adverse trial results. Since 2002, the company and its subsidiaries have been assessed $3 billion in criminal convictions, civil penalties, and jury awards. Let's read on. Here, USA Today's fact checks resolved lawsuits against Pfizer alleged marketing fraud. Claim Pfizer was sued $2.3 billion for bribing doctors and suppressing adverse trials. And here, USA Today marks this partly false. Whenever you see a magazine claiming to fact check something, you know they're up to no good. Let's read on. Fact check resolved. Pfizer alleged marketing fraud, data manipulation, May 20th, 2021. What do they say? Just skip that one. This Instagram post of April 26 claims Pfizer got sued for $2.3 billion in 2009 for bribing doctors and suppressing the adverse trial results. The Department of Justice wrote in a press release that Pfizer promoted the sale of Bextra for several uses and dosages that the FDA specifically declined to approve due to safety concerns. That's fraud. The Justice Department also said in 2019 that Pfizer paid $1 billion to resolve allegations of civil wrongdoing under the False Claims Act that the company illegally promoted Bextra and 3 other drugs, there they are, for different reasons. Pfizer's a bad actor. The company also resolved allegations that it paid kickbacks and illegal payment in exchange for preferential treatment or compensation to healthcare providers to encourage them to prescribe the drugs. This is the organization we're supposed to trust their vaccine. In 2004, Pfizer agreed to pay $430 million in a Department of Justice settlement and pleaded guilty to 2 violations of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Acts for marketing the drug Neurontin, also known as gabapentin, for unapproved uses. This is Pfizer. We're supposed to trust them with their vaccine. According to a statement from the Department of Justice, Warren Lambert Company, Pfizer, which Pfizer acquired in 2000, promoted Neurontin even when scientific studies had shown it was not effective. Imagine my surprise that they're suppressing the adverse effects of vaccines, huh? Imagine my surprise. 2 examples include the promotion of Neurontin as the sole drug for epileptic seizures even after the FDA's rejection of solo use, as well as marketing the drug as effective for treating bipolar disease, of which it has no effect. In an April press release, Pfizer confirmed high efficacy and no serious safety concerns following an updated landmark COVID-19 vaccine study. No serious safety concerns, huh? This is from Pfizer. Lilly, Trudeau is suing. Okay, now we're into another topic here. Because we want to get back to the tyranny rising in Canada. And this leads into the next topic here. That Trudeau is suing the House of Commons to keep lab firings secret. This comes back to this whole beginnings of the connection between Canada's labs and the Wuhan lab from 2 Chinese scientists who were sending viruses to China. We talked about this a little while ago. This just came out on June 24th, 2021. To have a backdrop on the story, the 2 Chinese scientists were investigated by RCMP and marched out of the labs, and then they subsequently lost their jobs. They were sending vaccines illegally, or rather not vaccines, but viruses, live viruses, Ebola and another virus, back to China. They were also involved in other illegal activities in the lab. So let's read what happens here. And this is in the Winnipeg High Dangerous Goods Laboratory or something like this, a virus lab in Winnipeg, a high security lab. On Wednesday, the Trudeau government filed a lawsuit against the Speaker of the House of Commons in federal court. The reason for the lawsuit is to have the court issue an order sealing documents demanded by the House through a vote earlier this month. The documents they are sealing is the information around those 2 Chinese scientists who were spies for China and had to be taken out by the RCMP. Why is Trudeau hiding this? Let's read on. The Commons Committee on Canada-China Relations has been asking for documents related to the firing of these 2, Xingguo Qiu and her husband, Ken Ding Cheng, from the National Microbiology Laboratory in Winnipeg. In January 2021, it was revealed that the pair were fired after an intervention from CSIS, CSIS, not the RCMP. The RCMP investigated, or rather took them out of the building. CSIS investigated them. While still at the lab, Dr. Q was involved in shipping samples of Ebola and Henipa viruses to the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. There was also the sharing of other information between the lab and the Wuhan Institute. Espionage. This week, the National Post reported that Dr. Q is listed as one of the inventors on 2 patents filed in Beijing by the Chinese government in 2017 and 2019 related to Ebola and Marburg viruses. It is illegal for Canadian civil servants to file a patent outside the country without permission from the minister they report to. After ignoring several requests from the committee to turn over documents, the House of Commons voted last week to order the papers released. They've been refusing to comply with the House of Commons order, and this is a normal process in the House of Commons. In going to court, the Trudeau government is showing that they want to reject the will of Parliament, to rule without oversight and trample on the long-standing rights and privileges of MPs. Those MPs have the rights to see those documents. And this plays into, this is where the connection between the virus, the pandemic, the emergency procedures being implemented for lockdowns, the increasing tyranny, and the use of these vaccines and promotion of these vaccines in Canada. This is where it comes to the intersection of Canada's march towards tyranny under Trudeau. Should we be worried about Justin Trudeau? Well, he doesn't respect Parliament. This has never been done before. That no Prime Minister, nobody's ever taken the House, the Parliament to court to block what they legally their right to see. Read the article in there. There's a lot more detail about the history of this and the unprecedented nature of Trudeau's overreach of powers. Now I'm going to move into the main part of this, the culminating part of this whole show here today, and that's the rising tyranny under tyrant Trudeau. And Jill on Twitter pointed out, Canada masquerades as a free country. In reality, it is one of the most corrupt nations in the world. That is absolutely true. The Liberal government under Trudeau has taken control of all the media across Canada. They're passing new bills to control what Canadians can say and do online, and they're making criminal laws to prosecute people for what the government will call hate speech. And this is the most dangerous part of this whole process in Canada. And this is a warning to the world. This is how tyrants take over. This is unfolding before our very eyes. This is exactly how totalitarian governments come to be born. Laura Crasson underneath posted that Bill C-10 passed this morning at 1:30 a.m. in Canada. Goodbye free speech on the internet. And this is far more serious than even at first glance it shows. I'm going to get into some details of it right now. And I'm going to show you how the politicians are already using their hate speech law before it's even enacted into law. They're using it as a threat. Bill Curry says, Bill C-36 on hate speech has been tabled. Here's the summary. Let's have a look what he's going to say here. I'm going to pop this up for you. You can read this later if you want to pause at this point. I'm going to make it full screen for you rather here for a second. So here's where you would pause if you want to read this, but I'm not going to read it through because I'm going to go over it from an article in a later screen capture very shortly. So let's go on to the next one. I remember when the original censorship provision was repealed a decade ago. Every media outlet in Canada cheered the increase in freedom. Now 99% of journalists are owned by Trudeau through CBC or rented by him through the newspaper bailout. What side will they be on now? Trudeau, as you know, I've said many times here, bribed the entire media with $600 million of new grants every year, and he pays over $1 billion to CBC every year. None of them will say a bad thing about the Trudeau government. And it's my tweet in response to this, and I'm getting into the meat of this very, very shortly in the next few slides. Trudeau inches his totalitarian lockdown of Canada forward. Beware, a mere accusation can land you in Canada's star chamber, the human rights tribunals, where your life will be destroyed, where they will destroy your life. Canada is lost to tyrants. And this is, I make this claim because Trudeau has every indication it's going to get another government in the fall election. There's an election coming in Canada in a few months, which is why these next two bills are being rushed through Parliament. We'll see shortly. It's also why he bribed the $600 million to the media and keeps increasing the funding to CBC. They own them. They're all propaganda outlets for the Trudeau government. Will Bill C-10 impact what I can post online? Here's what you need to know. This is printed May 12th. Bill C-10 would update the Broadcasting Act in Canada and allow the CRTC, his commission, to regulate digital platforms on the internet like Netflix. The act hasn't changed since 1991. This is how it first was presented. But a move by the Commons Heritage Committee on April 23rd to remove a section that exempted user-generated content on social media from regulation has sparked controversy. They took that out of the bill. This is the creep of totalitarian tyranny. They keep removing limitations to their powers. They keep removing it little bit by little bit until their power is absolute. Some legal experts have said removing the exemption could result in the CRTC adopting regulations that would impact everyday people and their uploads to social media, including their cat videos and TikTok dances. And that, some argued, infringes on freedom of expression. If you don't argue that, then you don't understand what freedom of expression is. Liberals pushed to end Bill C-10 study amid social media free speech concerns. This is June 4th, just a couple of weeks later. They took the restriction from, they removed the restriction from dealing with social media in order to expand their powers of control of what people say online, and there was outrage about it. And what did the Liberals next do? They pushed an end to the investigation into the bill. End of debate, end of discussion. Let's look at what they really did here. Reading from the top with me, I'm going to expand this for you. The federal Liberals sparked an uproar over a bid Friday morning to shut down committee study on its controversial Bill C-10. As experts continue to express concern about the impact the legislation could have on free speech online, the Liberals moved a time allocation motion for the bill on Friday morning, a procedural move that crunches the time allotted to discussing a bill and is normally used to limit hours of debate in the House of Commons, not at committees. Again, a first in Canadian government. They use this technique, this technicality, to shut down the committee's investigation into the bill before it goes to the House of Parliament. Those time allocation bills are used so that the House of Parliament doesn't get bogged down in a long debate. That debate is supposed to happen in these committees, those in study and analysis. But the Liberals use that, I don't think it's procedurally legal, but they're doing it anyways. The Liberal government doesn't care about customs laws and regulations. They break them all the time. And they are shutting down the debate, the study of the bill in the committee. And when it gets to Parliament, they won't have time to go into the details of the bill. Liberals and the Bloc Québécois vote to end Bill C-10 study amid social media free speech concerns. This is June 7th. So the Bloc Québécois backed up the Liberals, as usual. The Liberals, with the help of the Bloc Québécois on Monday, voted to start the clock to end a parliamentary committee's study of the controversial Bill C-10, which has been the subject of concerns for free speech and social media regulation. The government MPs backed a push to impose time allocation on the Heritage Committee's study of the bill, meaning the committee will now get no more than 5 more hours to study the bill before being cut off. 5 hours to study a bill that limits the free speech of every citizen on social media sites like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. The government wants CRTC, which is beholden to the government, to be able to regulate everything you say on social media. This is even worse than big tech. Heritage Minister Stephen Guilbeault defended the time limit as necessary given what he described as attempts by the Conservatives to stall the bill at committee and the few remaining days in the parliamentary calendar before the summer break. Guilbeault wants this to go through right away. They're rushing this bill because there's an election in the fall. This is not a coincidence. There's an election in the fall, and they don't want social media, the regular citizens, to be able to criticize the Trudeau government on social media in the fall. That's what this is about. They will shut down social media criticism. They've already bought all of the mainstream media with $600 million bribe for the non-CBC and more for the CBC, $1 billion something for CBC. And now they want to control the regular citizen journalists and regular citizens. This is not about protecting anyone but the government. This is how totalitarian governments form and get their power. This is why they're rushing it through the House. This is to be able to shut down criticism during the campaign for the next election. The circumstances are exceptional and called for an exceptional response, he said. Why is it, ask you this, what's so exceptional? Why do we need this new change to the bill before the next election? What's the emergency? It's been 30 years like this. The entire internet has been functioning along relatively well, except with the interference of big tech. All of a sudden, it's an emergency in a matter of months to give the government the right to censor all social media online in Canada. And they will tell you it has nothing to do with the upcoming election. It has everything and only to do with the upcoming election. And the tyranny, the ambition to be the tyrant, the first tyrannical ruler of Canada. He already has that title, but he wants absolute totalitarian control of Canada, just like he expressed before he was elected that he has an admiration for China's basic dictatorship. Trudeau's own words. Trudeau wants more power than China's dictators have. Let's read on. This extreme tactic has only been used 3 times in Canadian history, he said. We will continue to fight for the many Canadians who are concerned about this bill's implication for their social media and internet use. This is a critic of the bill, saying that only 3 times in history has this tactic to shut down debate on a bill been used. And this bill, if it's really about moderating what goes on the internet, which I don't agree with doing anyways, it's not an emergency. The only thing that makes this bill an emergency is the upcoming election. And it's an emergency only for the Liberals because they don't want their critics to be heard. Let's read on. And just like they're taking the House of Parliament to court over hiding the documents about the firing of the 2 Chinese. Everything Trudeau does is about hiding the truth from people and taking more tyrannical power that has never been used and held before in Canada's history. Read onward with me. NDP finance critic Peter Julian said the government is using time limits on the study to prevent questions being raised about Guilbeault's handling of criticism of the legislation. They're ramrodding their tyrannical censorship control through government and into law in Canada. Reading from the top. Bill C-10 became a source of parliamentary discord after the Liberals removed a section of the bill that protected user-generated content and exempted it from regulation. That meant Canadians' Facebook and Instagram posts could be forced to abide by certain CRTC rules. They want to control everything. And here in politics, Speaker slaps down Liberal-led attempt to rush through the changes to Bill C-10. That's June 15th. Late last week, the Canadian Heritage Measure, which has been studying committee has been studying Bill C-10 for months, moved to shut down its line-by-line study of the bill, and in the process rapidly passed a series of amendments before MPs on the committee had time to discuss them. Here's 2 points from that article. Is the government trying to regulate the videos you post? What you need to know about Bill C-10. With days left before summer break, feds look to pass key bills but deny an election is their motivation. In his ruling, Speaker Anthony Rota found that the committee exceeded its authority by passing the amendments after the House imposed time limit on further work by the committee had expired. As a result, he's ordered that all but one of the changes passed after their deadlines be struck from the version of the bill currently before the House. The one amendment Rota let stand was connected to a previously adopted change to the wording of the legislation. So they tried to ramrod that through by putting in amendments that had not been studied and then shutting the time down to debate them, but the Speaker of the House overrode it. The Speaker of the House has been trying to keep the Liberal government honest, and the Liberal government under Trudeau has been doing everything it can to prevent a clarity on all of these issues. Reading from the top, I proposed the extended deadline so more work could be done. I voted against closing debate, and I even put forward a motion asking the committee to debate the bill through the summer months so we could get this work done. All the parties voted against that. In the end, the Liberals closed the committee debate, and we were forced to vote on amendments without even discussing them. It is not my idea of good government, said NDP and committee member Heather McPherson in the House on Monday. We need more people with conscience in government. And then June 22nd, midnight madness. As Canadians slept, the Liberals, Bloc and NDP combined to pass Bill C-10 in the House of Commons. It was passed. There you have it. The tyrants won a big success in that one, paving the way for them to shut down all criticism of the Liberal government during the next election. And all of these people, the Bloc and the NDP, have all been supporting the minority government, the Liberals. So these three parties have been acting like one part since the beginning, since Trudeau won the minority election. And they all combined to pass this bill so that the government will censor what people have to say about them, about the politics. Reading onwards. The Liberal government strategy of multiple gag orders and a super motion to limit debate bore fruit last night as Bill C-10 received the House of Commons approval at 1:30 a.m. The parliamentary process took hours as the government passed multiple motions to cut short debate. They just kept passing motions to cut short the debate. They reinserted amendments that had previously ruled null and void and rejected a last-ditch attempt to restore Section 4.1 safeguards for user-generated content. Let that sink in. Let that sink in, folks. These were basically illegally, but ramrodded in amendments that had previously been struck down. And then they passed multiple motions to shut down debate. And at 1:30 in the morning, they approved the largest censorship law that Canada has ever seen, just in time for their election in the fall. This is how tyranny takes over. This is how tyrants act. This is how tyrants grab power and maintain it. This is how they control people. Let's read from the top. The debate concluded obvious errors from Liberal MPs who were presumably chosen to defend the bill. For example, Julie Debrusin, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage. Heritage really is their Ministry of Controlling the Truth, said the Section 2.1 in Bill C-10 specifically excludes content uploaded by users. Only it doesn't, as Debrusin should know, given that 2.1 covers users, not content. And she was the MP who introduced the amendment at committee to remove Section 4.1, which was the provision that excluded content uploaded by users. They will look you straight in the eye, lie, exactly denying completely opposite of what they just said and did, and then force this censorship law into law. Canada is a lost country. It's going to be very, very difficult to defeat the Liberals in the next election because they will censor all criticism. They will call it hate speech and censor it. And the law requires people to remove that content within 24 hours of the government's order, or you face crippling fines for that. This is how tyrants take over your country. Malcolm, this fellow in Toronto Sun, says Bill C-10 was just the tip of the iceberg. This is June 27th, just 2 days ago. The bill seeks to regulate everything from Facebook to Netflix to Google and potentially replace those companies' algorithms with a government-approved one, just in time for the election. This would allow the feds to push content they like and hide content they don't, just in time for the election. That's what this bill is about. It's about securing the tyrannical power that Trudeau has become addicted to. He is a full-on, full-blown tyrant. Let's read from the top. I'm not even exaggerating here. This is what a tyrant looks like, and this is what a tyrant does. Let's read from the top. It's bad enough that woke Silicon Valley executives already tilt the playing field to suppress conservative ideas and journalism. The idea that liberal hacks in the Prime Minister's office could determine what you see and what you don't puts Canada in uncomfortably close proximity to totalitarian China. I think that Trudeau could teach totalitarian China a thing or two. Totalitarian China didn't have to create this. They had the army from the beginning to enforce it. Trudeau is slickly ramrodding new censorship laws through Parliament. This is the addictive power of totalitarian power. Let's read from the top. Lo and behold, less than 24 hours after the Liberals rammed through Bill C-10, Justice Minister David Lametti tabled Bill C-36, and we're going to have a quick look at that shortly. A bill to crack down on so-called hate propaganda, hate crimes, and hate speech online. Their ducks all lined up, folks. Repressing, taking the Parliament of Canada to court to block release of important information to ministers, creating censorship laws, now creating hate crime laws that allows them to prosecute anybody they decide is promoting hate. We're going to have a look at this Bill C-36, and we're going to look at how they already have in mind how to use it, because a incriminating video came out of a minister already knowing how to use this Bill C-36 to instill fear and power over people. Reading from the top. Lametti tabled the last-minute bill on Wednesday, which, among other things, proposes to reinstate the much-maligned provision in the Canadian Human Rights Act, Section 13. Scrapping Section 13 was one of the crowning achievements of the Harper government. Let's read on. Trudeau's new hate speech bill would bring it back and make it illegal to use the internet to, quote, communicate or cause to be communicated hate speech, in which the hate speech is likely to foment detestation or vilification of an individual or group of individuals on the basis of a prohibited ground of discrimination. Hate speech, of course, is whatever who is in power defines it to be when they say it. As always, the devil is in the details. Hate speech, a vaguely defined term, is already illegal in Canada. The bill seeks to expand the government's power to crack down on messages and comments that they don't like, based on subjective and ill-defined criteria. Let's read forward. After Trudeau won minority election in 2019, his mandate letter to Heritage Minister Guilbeault laid out his top priorities. In that letter, Trudeau ordered the government to, quote, create new regulations for social media platforms, starting with a requirement that all platforms remove illegal content, including hate speech, within 24 hours or face significant penalties. Removing content the Liberals do not like within 24 hours, no less, erases any possibility for due process or appeal. It allows the government to play judge and jury and compel technology companies to do their dirty work. Folks, just in time for the next election. This is tyrannical power. Now, here we come to, now I want to remind you that these hate speech laws, they can be anything the government doesn't like. And they already have the censorship laws that allow them to remove anything from social media they don't like. Now, let's just have a look. This bill was just tabled, okay, Bill C-36, which allows the government to define what is hate speech laws and use them to punish and squash anybody they don't like. They already have in mind how to use it. And this was proven. This was proven in Rebel News' attempt to interview Minister McKenna, Catherine McKenna. And just pay close attention to her drawing upon the idea of hate when an interview when a reporter tried to ask her an uncomfortable question. This is how the Liberals are going to use this law. The reporter tried to ask her an important question. Imagine what's going to happen with this. Okay,
Regulate everything.
I'm going to draw this up here.
I certainly
just pause this for a second and get it online and ready and full screen. Close attention to what's going on in this video.
Could you tell me what you meant when you said yesterday that your government might regulate everything?
I certainly never said that. So
you said it. You actually said it as a threat.
Unfortunately, Rebel News always distorts what I say.
No, it was quite clear. You said it in a tweet as a threat to companies, digital companies that don't regulate themselves. You said the government could regulate everything.
Say to you that you guys are contributing to hate against me because you spread misinformation and disinformation. I will continue to call out your misinformation and disinformation every single day.
Okay, what was the misinformation? Please tell me. I'd be interested to hear.
The misinformation and disinformation is what you just said right now. That
You threatened yesterday to regulate. You said on Twitter.
You know what I don't like?
Sure, please tell me.
Is that you're contributing to all the hate I'm receiving.
Could you tell me what you meant when you said yesterday that your government?
Okay, folks, I hope you get the implication, because it's very, very, very clear here. This is a minister of the Liberal government who, being asked calmly by a reporter on the street, got flustered and immediately accused him of spreading and contributing to the hate against her. A claim coming from a minister. That is a threat. Now that they have these hate laws in place, they can draw upon that. He's not contributing. He has a reporter doing a job, asking her about her own tweets in her own words. And instead of addressing the question, she flipped it to he was contributing to hatred against her. This is how the totalitarian power will play out. These hate speech laws she's already showing us they know how they're going to use these hate speech laws. This is how they're going to use them. A clearer example cannot be found. This is the tyranny under Trudeau. Canada is in grave, grave danger. Personally, I don't see how you can escape from under it. If Trudeau gets re-elected, and he likely will, because Canadians like his hair, he's a pretty boy, and that's all they care about. And they are blinded by this promise of some kind of utopian socialism. Trudeau will get back into power, even if it's a minority government. The NDP will continue to back him up, as will the Bloc Québécois, and this encroachment of tyranny is guaranteed to destroy the country. This video is probably going to be deleted by YouTube. I'm going to upload it in other areas. But I tell you this, I told you this before, get out. The country of Canada is heading in a totalitarian direction that is going to be very, very painful and destructive to anybody who lives there. I would look for any jurisdiction that strongly protects your personal individual freedoms and rights. So that's all I've got to say today. I'm very thankful that so many of you have managed to stay through the full hour and a half of this. This video, I think, is loaded with very important information that deserves some deeper treatment and deserves to be dwelled upon to try and get a sense of the implications of what's going on before our very eyes today. So, folks, as I like to say at the end of every one of these shows, do something you love to do today. Do something every day, because this is your life. No matter what is going on, you should do something you love to do every single day. And if you don't have something you love to do, find something and do it every day. So with that said, thank you for joining me here on Studio Brûlé, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Steve.